My children fought over my inheritance, while I was sick. So I recovered and spent it all on a world cruise. Picture this. My 3 adult children standing in my living room, jaws dropped to the floor, staring at the glossy travel brochures, scattered across my coffee table. "Mom, you can't be serious," my eldest daughter stammered, her face pale as she read the words, "Mediterranean World Cruise, 120 days. But oh, I was dead serious. You see, while they thought I was on my deathbed, planning their financial futures, I was actually planning something far more spectacular. Let me tell you exactly how I taught my ungrateful children that you should never count your chickens or your inheritance before they hatch. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Silver Stories. My name is Margaret. I'm 73 years old, and I've always believed that family comes first, hard work pays off, and respect is earned, not demanded. For 45 years, I poured my heart, soul, and wallet into raising 3 children who I thought would be my pride and joy. I sacrificed vacations to pay for their college tuition, postponed my own dreams to fund their weddings, and worked overtime well into my 60s to make sure they never wanted for anything. I thought I'd raised them right. I thought they loved and respected their old mom. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening. If you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most, or if you believe that age brings wisdom worth respecting, then buckle up for this story. Drop a comment if you think children today have forgotten what it means to honor their parents, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Granny's Tales for more tales of grandparents who refuse to go gentle into that good night. Let me paint you a picture of just how much I gave to these children of mine. My oldest, Patricia, was always the ambitious one. When she decided she wanted to be a lawyer, did I tell her to take out student loans like other kids? No. I cashed out half my retirement fund to send her to law school. When she married that pompous husband of hers, David, I paid for their dream wedding, $30,000 for a single day. When they bought their first house, guess who covered the down payment? That's right, good old Mom. Then there's my middle child, Robert. Oh, Robert. Always the entrepreneur. Always with a guaranteed business idea that just needed a little startup money. Over the years, I invested in his food truck venture, his app development company, his cryptocurrency trading platform, and his organic dog treat business. None of them ever turned a profit, but did he ever pay me back? Not a cent. "It's just a temporary setback, Mom," he'd say with that charming smile. "The next one's going to make us all rich." And my baby, Jennifer, sweet Jennifer, who could never quite get her life together. Divorced twice by 35, always between jobs, always needing help with rent, groceries, or car payments. I lost count of how many times I wrote her a check to keep the lights on or put food on the table for my grandchildren. "Just until I get back on my feet, Mom," was her constant refrain. For years, I gave and gave and gave. I babysat their children while they built their careers. I hosted every holiday dinner, bought every birthday gift, remembered every anniversary. I thought this was what mothers did, sacrifice for their children's happiness. But somewhere along the way, their gratitude turned into expectation. Their requests became demands. My generosity became their right, not my gift. They stopped saying thank you. They stopped asking how I was doing. Phone calls became rare, and visits became even rarer, unless they needed something, of course. I started noticing little things. How they'd roll their eyes when I'd share a story from my youth. How they'd interrupt me mid-sentence to talk about themselves. How they'd make jokes about my age, my outdated opinions, my simple lifestyle. "Oh, Mom's being dramatic again," became Patricia's favorite dismissal. "Mom doesn't understand how the modern world works," Robert would say with condescending patience. "Mom, you're overreacting." Jennifer would sigh whenever I expressed hurt feelings. I began to feel invisible in my own family, like I was nothing, more than a checkbook with legs, valued only for what I could provide, not for who I was. The breaking point came last spring. I'd been feeling under the weather for a few weeks. Nothing serious, just a persistent cough and some fatigue that my doctor attributed to a seasonal bug. But when I mentioned it during one of our rare family dinners, you'd have thought I'd announced my funeral plans. "Mom, you need to take better care of yourself," Patricia said, but her tone wasn't concerned. It was calculating. "At your age, you can't afford to let things slide. Maybe it's time to think about some practical arrangements," Robert added, exchanging meaningful glances with his siblings. "You know, just in case." Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. "We should probably discuss your will, Mom. Make sure everything's in order." I was taken aback. Here I was, dealing with what amounted to a bad cold, and they were already planning my estate. But I brushed it off. Surely they were just being practical, right? Wrong. Over the next few weeks, as I recuperated at home, I started noticing strange behavior. Patricia stopped by unannounced one afternoon, not to check on my health, but to casually ask about my financial documents. "Just want to make sure everything's organized, Mom," she said, rifling through my desk drawers. "You know, in case of emergency." Robert showed up the next week with a stack of papers. "I've been thinking about your situation, Mom," he said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "I think it might be wise to set up a trust. Transfer some assets now, avoid probate later. I could manage everything for you." Then Jennifer arrived with her own agenda. "Mom, I was thinking, maybe I should move in with you, to take care of you. And since you won't be needing all this space much longer." She was already measuring my living room with her eyes. It was like watching vultures circle. They weren't caring for a sick mother. They were positioning themselves around a dying cash cow. But the absolute last straw came when I overheard a phone conversation that chilled me to the bone. I'd been napping in my bedroom when I heard voices in the kitchen. Patricia had let herself in with the spare key I'd given her for emergencies. I was about to call out when I heard my name mentioned, so I stayed quiet and listened. "The old bat's getting worse," Patricia was saying. "Dr. Morrison says it could be months, maybe weeks." My blood ran cold. Dr. Morrison? I hadn't even seen Dr. Morrison in over a year, and I certainly hadn't given anyone permission to discuss my health with him. "Good," Robert's voice chimed in. "I've already started the paperwork for the trust transfer. Once we get power of attorney, we can start liquidating some of her assets. The house alone is worth $300,000. "What about the life insurance?" Jennifer asked. "And her retirement accounts?" "Between everything, we're looking at close to $1 million, Patricia replied. "Split 3 ways. That's enough to solve all our problems." "Thank God," Robert sighed. "The business is hemorrhaging money again, and Sarah's been on my case about the mortgage." "I'm already looking at apartments," Jennifer added. "Maybe a nice 2-bedroom. The kids would love having their own rooms." I sat there in my bed, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. They weren't just planning my funeral. They were celebrating it. Their own mother, whom they believed to be dying, and all they could think about was how to spend my money. But wait, it got worse. "We need to make sure she doesn't do anything stupid with the money before then," Patricia continued. "I heard Mrs. Chen down the street talking about some charity Mom's been considering. We can't let her give our inheritance away to strangers." "Maybe we should suggest she's not competent to make major financial decisions," Robert mused. "No, for her own protection." "Exactly," Patricia agreed. "We're doing this out of love." Love. They called this love. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my heart breaking not from illness, but from betrayal. These children I'd sacrificed, everything for, were literally waiting for me to die so they could get their hands on my money. They'd already divided up my life's work among themselves like it was Christmas morning. But here's the thing they didn't know. I wasn't dying. In fact, my cough had already cleared up, and I was feeling better than I had in months. They're dying. Mother was very much alive and now very, very angry. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at my life from the outside in. Really looked at it. What I saw was a woman who had spent 73 years putting everyone else's needs before her own. A woman who had worked 2 jobs to put her children through college while driving a 15-year-old car. A woman who had postponed her own dreams, her own adventures, her own happiness for people who saw her as nothing more than a walking ATM. Well, no more. I started by calling my doctor, my real doctor, not the mysterious Dr. Morrison. My children had apparently been consulting. "Dr. Hayes," I said, "I need you to do me a favor. If anyone calls asking about my health, you tell them that patient confidentiality prevents you from discussing my condition with anyone without my written consent." "Of course, Margaret," he replied, sounding confused. "That's standard procedure. Anyway, has someone been claiming to have information about your health?" "Something like that," I said grimly. Next, I called my lawyer, Frank Peterson. Frank had handled my affairs for 20 years, and I trusted him completely. "Frank," I said, "I need to make some changes to my will and set up some financial protections. Can you come by this afternoon?" "Certainly. Margaret, is everything all right?" "Everything's about to be perfect," I replied. When Frank arrived, I laid out everything I'd overheard. His face grew more shocked with each detail. "Margaret, I'm so sorry," he said when I finished. "No one should have to deal with this kind of betrayal from their own children." "I'm not looking for sympathy, Frank," I told him firmly. "I'm looking for solutions." Together, we crafted a plan that was both legally sound and personally satisfying. First, we set up ironclad protections for my assets, making it impossible for anyone to claim I was incompetent or to manipulate me into signing anything. Second, we created a new will that would reflect my true wishes, not my children's expectations. But the centerpiece of my plan was something far more immediate and infinitely more satisfying. "Frank," I said, pulling out a brochure I'd been secretly researching for months, "tell me about liquidating assets for a major purchase." He looked at the cruise brochure and started laughing. "Margaret, you wonderful, devious woman. Are you really going to do this?" "I'm 73 years old," I replied. "I've spent my entire adult life making other people's dreams come true. Don't you think it's time I made one of my own?" Over the next 2 weeks, while my children continued to hover around my deathbed, like eager heirs, I was busy putting my plan into motion. I met with financial advisors, travel agents, and Frank Peterson. I sold some investments, liquidated some accounts, and made arrangements that would change my life forever. The hardest part was pretending to still be sick. Every time one of my children visited with their fake concern and real greed, I had to resist the urge to tell them exactly what I thought of their behavior, but I knew the revelation would be so much sweeter if I waited for the perfect moment. That moment came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after overhearing their ghoulish planning session, my children requested a family meeting. They arrived at my house with manila folders, serious expressions, and barely concealed excitement. "Mom," Patricia began, settling into my favorite armchair like she already owned it. "We need to talk about your situation." "Our situation," Robert corrected, opening his folder with theatrical solemnity. "We're all in this together." Jennifer nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd clearly prepared in advance. "We just want what's best for you, Mom." I sat, in what they probably assumed would be my final family meeting, looking appropriately frail in my bathrobe and slippers. "What kind of situation are we talking about?" I asked weakly. Patricia pulled out a stack of documents. "Well, given your condition, we think it's time to make some practical arrangements. Robert's drawn up some papers that would make things easier for everyone." "Easier how?" I asked innocently. Robert cleared his throat importantly. "We're talking about a transfer of assets, Mom. Setting up a trust with us as trustees. That way, when the time comes, there won't be any complications with probate or estate taxes." "When what time comes?" I pressed, though I knew exactly what they meant. The three of them exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Jennifer spoke up. Mom, we know you're not getting better. Dr. Morrison explained everything to us. Interesting. Dr. Morrison again. The doctor I hadn't seen in over a year. What exactly did Dr. Morrison tell you? I asked. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. He said you might only have a few months left, maybe less. I nodded thoughtfully. And based on this conversation you had with Dr. Morrison, without my permission, I might add, you've decided to take over my finances? It's not taking over, Robert protested. It's protecting. Protecting you, protecting the family assets, protecting everyone's future. Everyone's future, I repeated slowly. How thoughtful of you. That's when I decided it was time for the grand reveal. I stood up from my chair, much more steadily than they expected, and walked over to the coffee table where I'd hidden my surprise under a decorative cloth. You know, I said conversationally, pulling away the cloth to reveal a stack of glossy travel brochures. I've been doing some planning of my own. The change in the room was immediate. Patricia's mouth fell open. Robert's important documents scattered to the floor. Jennifer's prepared tissues froze halfway to her eyes. What is this? Patricia stammered. I picked up the top brochure and held it out for them to see. This, my dear children, is the Costa Luminosa Mediterranean World Cruise. 120 days, 15 countries, and the adventure of a lifetime. Mom, Robert said slowly, what are you talking about? I'm talking about finally living my life instead of just funding yours, I replied, my voice growing stronger with each word. You see, while you three were busy planning my funeral and dividing up my estate, I was busy making plans of my own. I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out a confirmation letter. I sail from Miami in 6 weeks. First-class accommodations, all meals included, shore excursions in every port. The total cost is, well, let's just say it's a significant portion of what you were so eager to inherit. The silence in the room was deafening. Then Patricia found her voice. Mom, you can't be serious. You're sick. You can't go on a cruise around the world. Funny. Think about that, I said, settling back into my chair with a smile. I'm feeling much better. In fact, when I called Dr. Morrison's office to ask about this conversation you claimed to have with him, his nurse informed me that discussing a patient's condition without written consent is a serious breach of confidentiality. She also mentioned that they have no record of anyone calling about me in the past year. Robert's face went white. Mom, we can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can, I interrupted. Just like you can explain why you were measuring my living room for furniture, Jennifer. Or why you were going through my financial documents, Patricia. Or why you've been telling people I'm dying when I'm perfectly healthy, Robert. The truth was finally out, and they knew it. We were just concerned, Jennifer began. Concerned? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you what I heard 3 weeks ago when you thought I was sleeping. I repeated their conversation, word for word, watching their faces grow paler with each sentence. By the time I finished, Patricia was crying. Robert was staring at the floor, and Jennifer looked like she wanted to disappear. So you see, I concluded, I know exactly how concerned you were. Concerned about getting your hands on my money before I could spend it on something ridiculous, like my own happiness. Mom, we're sorry, Patricia whispered. We didn't mean. You meant every word, I said firmly. And now you're going to live with the consequences. I pulled out another set of documents, the ones Frank Peterson had prepared. These are copies of my new will. You might find the changes illuminating. Robert grabbed his copy and started reading. His face went from white to green. Mom, You can't. This isn't fair, I supplied. Neither was waiting for me to die so you could spend my money. The new will was quite different from the old one. Instead of leaving everything to my 3 children, I'd established a charitable foundation in my name. The bulk of my estate would go to causes I actually cared about. Education scholarships for underprivileged children, support for elderly people who couldn't afford proper care, and funding for community programs that my own children had never bothered to learn I supported. They would each receive a small inheritance, enough to be meaningful, but nowhere near what they'd been expecting. The rest would go to people who would actually appreciate it. But the house, Jennifer said desperately. What about the house? What about it? I asked. It's my house. I'll do with it what I want. But we assumed. You assumed. Wrong, I said simply. About a lot of things. That's when I pulled out the final surprise. Oh, and one more thing. I've decided to document my cruise experience for my YouTube channel. Yes, that's right. I'm starting a YouTube channel, Silver Adventures with Margaret. I figure if you 3 can make plans without consulting me, I can make plans without consulting you. The look on their faces was priceless. Their dying mother was not only alive and healthy, but about to become a world traveler and social media influencer. Mom, Patricia said desperately, we can talk about this. We can work something out. The time for talking was before you started dividing up my life like a garage sale, I replied. The time for working things out was before you lied to me, manipulated me, and treated me like a wallet with legs. I stood up again, this time with the dignity and strength I'd been hiding for weeks. I leave for my cruise in 6 weeks, I announced. When I return, we can discuss what kind of relationship, if any, we're going to have going forward. But it will be on my terms, not yours. The weeks leading up to my departure were interesting to say the least. Patricia tried the legal route first, consulting with lawyers about having me declared incompetent. That lasted exactly as long as it took Frank Peterson to produce the medical evaluations and psychological assessments I'd proactively obtained. Turns out it's pretty hard to prove someone's incompetent when they've clearly and rationally planned an elaborate, legally sound response to their children's betrayal. Robert tried the emotional manipulation approach, showing up at my door with my grandchildren in tow. Grandma's leaving us, he told his confused kids. She doesn't love us anymore. That backfired spectacularly when my 8-year-old granddaughter asked, Daddy, why are you crying? Grandma's just going on vacation like you do for work. Jennifer tried the guilt route, claiming I was abandoning the family in their time of need. What time of need? I asked. The time when you need to find your own apartment instead of planning to move into mine? The time when you need to support your own children instead of expecting me to do it forever? But the most amusing part was watching them scramble to treat me with the respect they should have shown all along. Suddenly I was getting phone calls every day. Flowers appeared on my doorstep. They remembered my birthday for the first time in 3 years. Too little, too late. The day I left for Miami, only one person came to see me off, my neighbor Mrs. Chen, who'd become a good friend over the years. She hugged me tight and whispered, "Give 'em hell, Margaret," and that's exactly what I did. The cruise was everything I'd dreamed it would be and more. I watched sunrises over the Mediterranean, explored ancient ruins in Greece, sipped wine in Italian vineyards, and danced to flamenco. Music in Spain. I made friends from all over the world, learned to paint watercolors, took cooking classes, and even tried parasailing in Turkey. For 4 months, I lived like the vibrant, interesting woman I'd forgotten I was. I started my YouTube channel from the ship, documenting my adventures and sharing stories about rediscovering yourself at any age. To my surprise, it took off. Turns out there are a lot of people who feel taken for granted by their families, and even more who dream of breaking free from expectations to chase their own happiness. By the time I returned home, Silver Adventures with Margaret had over 50,000 subscribers, and was making enough money to fund my next adventure. When I walked back into my house after 4 months away, I was a different person. Suntanned, confident, and absolutely clear about what I would and wouldn't tolerate from my family. The first test came within a week of my return. Robert showed up at my door, not with apologies or genuine concern, but with another business proposal. "Mom," he said, settling into my living room like nothing had changed. "I've got this amazing opportunity. It's a sure thing this time, and I just need a small investment to get started." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what I'd been blind to for years. A middle-aged man who'd never learned to stand on his own 2 feet because his mother had always been there to catch him when he fell. "No," I said simply. He blinked, clearly not understanding. "No? But Mom, you haven't even heard the details." "I don't need to hear the details," I replied calmly. "The answer is no. It will always be no. I am no longer your personal bank." "But I'm your son," he protested. "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And I love you. But love doesn't mean enabling your refusal to grow up. You're 45 years old, Robert. It's time you learn to succeed or fail on your own merit." He left angry, muttering about how I'd changed, how money had made me cold. He was right about one thing. I had changed. I'd rediscovered my backbone. Patricia tried a different approach. She invited me to lunch at an expensive restaurant, probably hoping to butter me up in public where I'd be less likely to make a scene. "Mom," she said over appetizers, "I think we need to talk about your phase." "My phase?" I asked, amused. "This whole travel thing, the YouTube channel, the new will. I understand you were hurt by our misunderstanding, but don't you think you're taking it a bit far? What would you consider an appropriate response to your children eagerly planning how to spend your money while you're still alive?" I asked. She shifted uncomfortably. "We were just being practical." "You were being greedy," I corrected. "And disrespectful and manipulative. The question isn't whether my response was appropriate. It's whether you've learned anything from it." "Of course I have," she said quickly. "We all have. We realize we made mistakes." "What mistakes?" I pressed. She fumbled for words. We should have been more sensitive about your feelings." "Wrong answer." "Patricia," I said gently, "you should have treated me like a human being instead of the inheritance waiting to happen. You should have remembered that I'm your mother, not your retirement plan. You should have considered that maybe, just maybe, after 73 years of putting everyone else first, I might have some dreams of my own." The lunch ended with her in tears, and me feeling oddly free. Jennifer was the last to test the new boundaries, and she chose the nuclear option, bringing my grandchildren. "Grandma," my 10-year-old grandson said when they showed up at my door, "Mommy says you don't love us anymore because you spent our college money on a boat ride." I knelt, down to his level, my heart breaking at how my daughter had weaponized my relationship with my grandchildren. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "I love you more than all the stars in the sky. But I never spent your college money because I never promised to pay for your college. That's your mommy and daddy's job." I looked up at Jennifer, who had the grace to look ashamed. "Your mommy is upset because she counted on something that was never hers to count on," I continued. "But that doesn't change how much I love you. It just means that instead of expecting Grandma to solve all your problems, your family is going to learn to solve them together." After they left, I made a decision. I would absolutely have a relationship with my grandchildren, but it would be on my terms, and it would not involve Jennifer using them as emotional leverage. 6 months after my return, I'm sitting in my living room, the same living room where my children tried to manipulate me into signing away my independence, recording this story for my YouTube channel. Silver Adventures with Margaret, now has over 200,000 subscribers, and my story about the cruise has been viewed more than 1 million times. But more importantly, I've learned something that I wish I'd figured out decades ago. You teach people how to treat you. For years, I taught my children that my time, money, and energy were free for the taking. I taught them that their needs mattered more than mine. Their dreams were more important than my own. Their comfort was worth more than my dignity. And they learned those lessons well. It wasn't until I changed the curriculum that they started to pay attention. My relationship with my children today is complicated but honest. Patricia and I have started having real conversations, not about money or inheritance, but about life, books, current events. She's slowly learning to see me as a person rather than just a resource. Robert is still angry, but he's also started his own business without asking me for money. The jury's still out on whether it'll succeed, but at least he's trying. Jennifer and I have the most work to do, but we're getting there. She's found a job she actually likes and is learning to budget her money instead of just asking me for more. Do they respect me more now? Absolutely. Do they like me as much as they used to? Probably not. But here's what I've learned. It's better to be respected than to be taken for granted. It's better to be seen as difficult than to be seen as a pushover. It's better to be authentically yourself than to be a people-pleasing version of who you think others want you to be. And most importantly, it's never too late to reclaim your power. The cruise was wonderful, but it was just the beginning. I've got plans, big plans. Next month, I'm going on an African safari. In the spring, I'm taking a cooking class in France. I'm learning Italian, taking painting lessons, and considering writing a book about reinventing yourself after 70. My children don't get to vote on these decisions anymore. They don't get to guilt me out of my dreams or manipulate me into funding theirs. They don't get to treat me like a burden or a bank account. They get to treat me like Margaret, a woman who's lived an interesting life, has stories to tell, adventures to seek, and absolutely no patience for being taken for granted. And that's how this old grandmother taught her children the most important lesson of all. Never underestimate the power of a woman who's finally decided to put herself first. What do you think? Was my approach too harsh, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Have you ever had to lay down the law with entitled family members? Share your stories and opinions in the comments. I love a good chat. If you enjoyed watching this family learn a valuable lesson, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to Silver Adventures with Margaret for more tales of grandmother's justice, and hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when a new story drops. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's never too late to set sail toward your own happiness. Don't let anyone, not even family, keep you anchored to a life that doesn't serve you. Until next time, this is Margaret, reminding you that the best adventures begin when you finally decide you're worth having them.